Hey, so today we're going to do some sound design with distortion. We're going to make two different types of sounds. We're going to make sort of an industrial bleepy bloopy thing. It sounds like this. And we're going to make some more kind of traditional sounds like this. Cool, so let's get started. So what we're going to use operator. And we've just got a sine wave at the moment, and I'm going to distort it to death. So let's find some distortions under audio effects, amp. That is a distortion, let's have that. Auto filter, yeah, we can make that distort. Cabinet, yeah, why not? Drum bus, we can make that distort. Dynamic tube, we can make that distort. Glue compressor, look, everyone uses glue compressor on their sine waves, and I'm not going to do it today. Overdrive, that is definitely a distortion. Pedal, also a distortion. Saturator can be an amazing distortion. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different distortions. They've all got different settings as well, so they could all be doing different stuff. So what I'm going to do is OT it. Can't have enough OT. Let's bring up the levels. Cool, we're getting some nice texture out of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind down the dry wet on all of these. Our filter, let's get it distorting. We're going to use the MS2 mode. We're going to drive it to death. And we're going to put a utility on the end of it. So we've boosted 24 dB. We want to come down by about the same. Put the frequency all the way up. We're not using the filtering mode just yet. We're just using it to distort. Cabinet. Now cabinet I haven't used much. Let's chuck the dry wet down. We'll make it stereo. Bigger numbers are better, right? Near on axis, sure. Bus. Let's have some hard distortion. Oh, clipping. Sweet. I love clipping. Let's have some crunch. Not worry about the dampening. I wonder if that made it louder. Too bad. Is there a dry wet? There is. Let's back that off a little. Oh, dynamic tube, dry wet. Now I think C is the more broken one. Yeah, let's have broken. Increase bias, let's increase drive. Dry wet. On overdrive, let's make it a bit honky. Pedal, gain up. We'll use distort. Getting all nasal and busted, which is good. Wave shape. Nice. All right, so we've got all of our distortions doing various things. Let's try a different amp model while we're here. Like what heavy is doing. Cool. So we've got a whole bunch of effects. They're all doing a little bit of distortion, but there's no modulation in here yet. What I like to do is to use complex oscillators. So FM or wavetables, whatever. LFOs within a synthesizer can help, but something to give a sound modulation over time. The reason that I really favor FM for this is because it's unpredictable. So I get things that I'm not necessarily expecting to get. So let's set up some unpredictability. One of the ways to get unpredictability is to detune your oscillators a bit. So if we push our one oscillator a little, but if we bring in a slightly differently detuned oscillator, we should get some very unpredictable results. What I'm going to do here is wind this coarse value down to 0.5, which is below 1, and then bring the fine all the way up. So it's basically, at this point, it's at 1 again. Then if I bring the fine value down, I'm detuning down from 1. You can hear already we've got the two oscillators beating against each other. We've got FM happening at a frequency which isn't a straight harmonic of the note that we're playing. It's slightly off, so we're getting this beating effect. I'll hold it for a bit longer so you can hear it. Already getting some like rhythmic elements in there. What if we want to bring up the high end a bit? Well, we use a higher tuned oscillator and we'll just wind it in. You can detune that. The more detuned you get it, the faster it's going to feel in terms of its rhythmic quality. I like it. I'm going to try and get the detuning a little more stable so we get longer growls out of this. The other thing to note here is we're just using sine waves. So without all these effects, our sound is probably pretty dull. Okay, I've turned off all the effects. I mean, that's a really boring sound compared to our sound distorted to hell. And all that modulation in there is just coming from detuning the different operators. So another thing which can be fun to do is to just switch algorithm types. So I don't have a plan here. At the moment, everything's going top to bottom, but if we just flick through some different algorithms, we should get some pretty different results. Not all that different, but we tried. One of the other options we've got for sound design here is to change the oscillator types away from sine waves and to have a more harmonically complex oscillator to start with. We'll try a triangle on this highest oscillator and we'll see what happens. If we go to a triangle on the second one, it's opened the sound up a bit. What about if we go to a saw at the start? Okay, that's all actually holding together pretty well. We'll try a square on the highest one. So we can add some modulation. I'm going to use my all modulators rack, which I've done a video on. Link should appear. And yeah, it sounds like this now. So that's too much. So maybe we'll switch some of this off. So I like what chorus is doing, but it needs to come down a bit. And I want to keep some of that fizz that we're losing. There we go. So we've added the dry, fizzy part of the sound back in. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to record a few takes. So what we're going to do is we're going to find M Recorder, which is a Melder product. It can take any audio, even in standby mode, and record it to a file. So I use it to do exactly that. I'm going to just set this up. There. Okay, so I have an M Recorder folder on my C drive. I'm going to use that. And file name, sound design distortion. All right, so I'm going to hit record and I'm just going to make some changes and we'll see what we end up recording. Okay, so I've recorded 8 minutes of just messing around with knobs. I didn't really touch the modulations or the distortions at all, just messed around with various complex options in Operator. So making sure that oscillators weren't tuned to each other, changing envelopes, modulating the filter. The fun part now is digging through the 8 minutes of recordings and just pulling out the good parts. So let's go get it. So it is in CM Recorder. Okay, so we've got Sound Design Distortion. So we don't need M Recorder anymore. So we're just going to be looking to break these up into sensible individual sounds. Cool, that's one. Yeah, that's cool. So I'm only keeping the stuff that I think is actually interesting. You don't want to build a 2 terabyte sample library that you're never going to look at. You just want to take the good parts out of this. And remember, you can always make more, right? So once you get your process down for finding good stuff, don't save the stuff that you're not going to use, because you're just going to have to browse past it every time you go into your sample library. Try and take out just the good stuff and isolate that, and then keep that for later. So I really try to make it a habit to go and tidy up these long recordings into individual little sounds that I might actually use. I'm not always successful at doing that because it is just a bit of grunt work, but it's totally worth doing. Right, and I think here's where I started playing with the filter, and I really liked most of that. So I'm going to break this into main chunks because it's just a continuous chunk of audio. I'm going to look for where the sound changes totally, and otherwise I'm going to try and leave it in progressions. So this one, the filter, I think starts high and comes down. Let's have a listen. Okay, so it kind of changes about there. So that's one progression. All right, so now we've got to go through and just fade the edges of all of these so we don't have nasty pops when we go to use them. And I'm just making sure they all start around the start of the sample so that I'm not listening to silence when I'm trying to audition sounds. Okay, now I'm just going to consolidate all of these. All right, then we can do the old Show in Explorer trick. New folder, Industrial FM Noise. And I like to put the date in there so that... All right, so let's take all our consolidated WAV files. Now we have a whole bunch of industrial noise samples. So what about more conventional sounds? Can we get them out of this? Let's get a fresh operator. So we've got a sine wave. So that's a pretty aggressive sound we've got there. All right, so if we copy oscillator to all others and we just mix up the tuning of these a little bit. Make this a 1, make it there. make these different. Okay, so we've now got 4 sawtooths all FM each other, but if we use this across algorithm, we just get the output of the oscillators. So we should essentially have a bit of a Reese thing going on. So that's without the distortion. Let's try knocking the tuning around a bit more. So trying to filter this sound to make it less intense before all the distortions isn't really going to work that well. It's just so much distortion that all noise gets brought up. So we can use this filter instead to bring it down in intensity a little. So we can write a little riff of some kind here. We should set this up to be monophonic and have a bit of a glide time. That glide is a bit intense. Pretty much the same process applies here. If you don't want to map the cutoff directly, you can just modulate it with a controller. I've got a push here. So we'll chuck, oh, we've already got M recorder on here. Clean distortion 2. Okay, so we can hit record and we just modulate that filter and just get some pretty out there sounds. Change the pitch bend amount, make it 12. And this whole time M recorder is recording, so we're not losing anything by just stopping and starting. Cool, so we can stop recording. I've got 5 minutes of stuff there. And that's going to be more conventional instrument sounding stuff. So let's go get it. I'm not going to go through and break this recording up into individual parts because it keeps roughly the same tonality through the whole thing. It just changes filtering. If I find a piece that I like and I want to use a different piece in a song, it's really easy to just move these braces. You have to hold Alt and then drag them, but you can just scan through and find different sounds. Yeah, so I'm going to break this one into where I started and stopped the looping. So that way I can get rid of some of the silence at the start. But largely, once I started modulating it in one direction, it stayed pretty much a similar sound. And show in Explorer. This is a new folder under Jams 2019. BP Reese thing. Distortion. Okay, so now I've got a couple of takes. yeah, so those jams are good for chopping up later. Hey, I hope you enjoyed walking through sound design with distortion. I like using this process to just make weird different sounds. Sometimes atmospheres will pop out, sometimes you get a new lead, sometimes you get some weird percussive thing. It's a really fun process because you're never quite sure what you're going to get, but you know the ballpark it's going to be in. It's also really great for making those crazy, weird, distorted reeses and then band passing out just the bits that you like. I hope you use it and hope you make some crazy sounds. Cheers.